sex operative cutout, the way she sometimes can be smart, usually really dumb, different personalities. I've thought this privately. Since you said it, I'm going to go ahead and say it. She has the perfect signature of someone that's been through trauma-based mind control.
That's exactly what the journalist said. And he knew her parents. I mean, he knew her mother.
Okay, well, I've been following you, but I didn't know this. Everybody's been calling me saying, you got to get Candace on. I'm going to shut up then. Start over. This is huge.
Yeah, so this is a journalist. You can watch this on my YouTube page, guys. You can head over to the live tab. And we had on Yoichi Shimatsu. He's a Japan editor, and he had written this piece about how her mother was in the MK Ultra program. He personally hates Kamala because a person that helped her get through law school, who was his protege, wound up dead in extremely, extremely suspect circumstances. That man's name was Jeff Adachi. He made an enemy of the San Francisco mafia, and he wound up dead with some very suspicious things happening at the medical examiner's office. It was a huge scandal. And so he basically wrote this piece out of exasperation and anger. And he said, people do not realize what she is. Her mother worked at a hospital in, I want to say Montreal, in Montreal, where they were running the MK Ultra program. And he was speaking extensively about how she was brought over because she was very good with apes. And at this time is when you had like Jane Goodall, and you had, they were really interested in experimenting on apes in order to determine what they could do to humans psychologically. And so she got drafted into the MK Ultra program. Now, I know that the depictions that she tells you about her childhood are not real because, Alex, I don't know if you know this, but while I've been doing this series, Kamala's family members reached out, the ones that are not communists, to verify that she's been lying about her genealogy and said her mother was extremely strict on her. You know, those girls were run like a military, probably because it was a military program. It was a CIA program. And so it is extremely alarming that this guy comes out, he tells you he's from the same circles as Kamala Harris. No one has been able to debunk anything that he has said. And it does look like when you see where her mother worked, and you are familiar with the MK Ultra program, which, like you said, you can look this up on Wikipedia. This is not a conspiracy. That Kamala may have been drafted into that program. It's quite terrifying.
And unlike most headquarters being Virginia or DC or Maryland for other federal programs, San Francisco is the recognized world headquarters of MK Ultra and its privatization operations.
Correct.
That came out in the Senate hearings in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And that there's a book that I've been recommending everybody read called Chaos, which talks about that's why Charles Manson was all throughout California. He was a Fed. He got turned in prison, taught how to hypnotize people. And the purpose behind that, again, was war. Just to be clear, they lied about what happened that night with the Manson murders. He wasn't there. He was a Fed. The women were people that were working on behalf of the Feds. And they wanted America to think that this mass murder had happened and it was executed by a hippie commune, when in fact it wasn't. The CIA was verifiably there that night, thanks to the remarkable journalistic work of Tom O'Neill in the book Chaos. They were there that night because America, everyone was on LSD, thanks to the CIA, but they had this effect where nobody wanted to go to war. It was like peace, love, rock and roll. And so when they said, no, we want to go to war, we want to go to war right now. We want to go to Vietnam. We're going to do this in Cambodia. They wanted everyone to snap out of this LSD reverie. And what better way to do it than with a psychologically traumatizing event? Speaking about how, they carved a baby out of this actress that everybody loves and, wrote her blood on the wall. People instantly, they say this is the day the music died. The hippie generation ended the day of the Charles Manson murders, and the reporters all started reporting on it and how gory it was, and people were terrified. And suddenly the peace love generation ended. So it was a psychological program. Charles Manson was in fact an MK Ultra Fed, which is fascinating.
And again, for people that don't study history, this sounds weird, but MK Ultra was just, again, one large program. The entire mind war program starting in the 50s, and the Russians, the Chinese were obsessed with mind war as well. At some points, they were spending in research more on mind control than they were on new weapons development. I mean, that's like congressional hearings, folks. We're talking trillions a year in today's numbers, billions and billions back then on just mass mind control testing. Mm-hmm. And it's come out in the newspaper that UT has, a long-term, it's out in Bastrop, monkey ape testing program, and that's all funded by DARPA. And I was once given a tour by one of the high-ups like 25 years ago of the UT facility, not of the actual primate facility, but I was shown the control rooms at UT in areas you're not allowed into, the psychology department. I'm like, why am I being shown this? Well, back then, they were trying to be friendly to me, and it turned out the guy later went to be high-level MIT, and the guy was like, want me to take acid and stuff with him. I never did that, but it was through some people I knew. That was another recruitment arm. But it just shows how big this is. They were trying to get me into that, and I only realized that years later. That's how huge this is. It's not like, oh, I'm special. This is giant.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, LSD was considered by the MK Ultra that could be the drug that could, brainwash people. And some of the experiments that they did, I mean, it really scary stuff, like men who woke up and they routinely experimented. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb led the program, routinely experimented on people that were just in the military. You had one guy who had a family, had never committed a crime in his life, woke up out of a reverie and with blood all over him and was told that he raped and killed a 4-year-old girl. This is in that book, Chaos. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb testified in his defense and then watched him get electrocuted. The guy, from the day he died said he had no idea what had happened, and it was very clear that it had happened at an MK Ultra facility. I mean, it very heavily implied in that book that it was clear that they had used him to see if they could compel him to commit a crime. They wanted to see if they could also turn people via MK Ultra program into serial killers, which makes you really re-examine sort of the 70s and sort of the dawn of all of these serial killers that we really hadn't seen the light of before in America, which suddenly it seemed to be a trend. And yes, the writing is very much on the wall. These are fair questions to ask when you hear, whether you're talking about a school shooting or you're talking about a serial killer, that you had somebody who was on drugs. That's why I always say, what is in their medicine cabinet? Because they had determined, and again, you can read this in that book, Chaos, written by Tom O'Neill, that the program was successful, that they had successfully created a cocktail of drugs, which could brainwash people. That's terrifying. Like your government.
Well, let's expand on that. That was the beta test. Then by the 80s, they roll out the Prozac and stuff that puts people in a trance state for programming, and they put on the label can cause psychotic breaks, can cause mass murder, can cause all of that, and almost every shooter is on that. So, but let's expand. Mm-hmm. Dr. Ewing Cameron. This was even on this History Channel, 25 years ago. It's declassified with Jolyon West, who was the government-appointed psychiatrist over Tim McVeigh, and a bunch of others. They ran a large part of the MK Ultra program, where over 10,000 children were kidnapped or taken from foster homes and programmed in the U.S. and Canada with electroshock therapy, with audio sensory systems, and with a cocktail of LSD and other drugs to create sex slave operatives for pedophile Jeffrey Epstein compromising, and to create couriers and assassins. And so this is an industrial level program.
That's correct. And I should add here, I said Dr. Sidney Gottlieb was there for the execution. It was actually Dr. Jolly West. You're correct. And a really sinister human being who wrote excessively. He was using a fake name, which they uncovered in that book, Chaos. And this is the reality. This is the government that we are fighting right now. And I think people now are moving away from perceiving these things as conspiracies because it's so evil that you don't want to believe that your government is capable of this, to recognizing the kind of evil that our government is capable of. When you see this sort of mass programming take place. I mean, what do you think COVID was? The CIA has been experimenting to see whether or not you can make people not believe their own eyes. Like that's the ultimate goal. Don't believe your own eyes. And they have proven that's successful, that COVID was a remarkably successful psychological experiment, right? You had people who were willing to never see their relatives again, to, 6 feet social distance, people that are still wearing masks today because they were so psychologically traumatized by the repetition of the news stations. And there's a reason they say the same words over and over again. That's a form of hypnosis, by the way. 6 feet social distancing, wear a mask, save lives. They have shown in studies at the CIA that works, that repetition works, that people will assume that if everybody's doing it and everybody is saying it, therefore it must be true. And of course, this leads back into discussions about Operation Mockingbird, which was an operation that the CIA never discontinued and that they chose to put in place after JFK was shot, right? They suddenly started putting journalists on payroll. And you see it today when all of the journalists are using the exact same phrases to cover the exact same stories. This is Operation Mockingbird. Repeat the same thing over and over again until Americans believe that it's true, until Americans believe that January 6th was an insurrection, until Americans believe that if you open your door and go outside, your grandma's going to die because you breathe. And but I'm remarkably optimistic about it because the fact that we have so many independent journalists that are so much more successful than these mainstream media journalists today shows you that the American people know that they're being lied to. And that to me represents the beginning of the end for the elites who are going to get desperate.
And